Every evening my wife went out to check the mail, but she always came back far too cheerful. I installed a hidden camera in the yard, and finally saw who she'd been visiting all this time. I'm glad you're here with me. Please listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. I thought I knew everything about my wife. After 17 years of marriage, you develop a rhythm, a comfortable understanding of each other's habits and quirks. Sarah was my rock, my partner, the woman who'd stood by me through job losses, family deaths, and all the mundane struggles that make up a real life. We lived in a modest 2-story house in suburban Ohio, the kind of neighborhood where people still waved to each other and knew their neighbors' names. Our life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. I worked as an accountant at a mid-sized firm downtown. Sarah had been a teacher but quit 5 years ago to focus on her pottery business, which she ran from our converted garage. Money was sometimes tight, but we managed. We had our Friday movie nights, our Sunday morning pancakes, our inside jokes that no one else would understand. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. But isn't that always the case? Hindsight makes fools of us all. It started about 4 months ago, in late June. Sarah began taking evening walks to check the mail. Nothing unusual about that, right? Except we had a mailbox at the end of our driveway. There was no reason to walk anywhere to check it. When I pointed this out, she laughed it off, saying she meant the post office box we'd rented months ago for her business orders. "I like the walk," she'd say, kissing my cheek. "Gets me out of the house, clears my head after working with clay all day." Fair enough. I understood needing space, needing air. I didn't think much of it at first. But then I noticed the pattern. Every evening, right around 8 o'clock, like clockwork. She'd announce she was going to check the mail, throw on a light jacket regardless of the weather, and disappear for exactly 45 minutes to an hour. And when she came back, that's what started to bother me. She'd return glowing, energized, sometimes even humming. Her cheeks would be flushed, her eyes bright. She seemed happier after these walks than she'd been in months, maybe years. Shouldn't I have been glad about that? What kind of husband resents his wife's happiness? But the thing was, she never seemed that happy with me anymore. When we sat together watching television, her mind was elsewhere. When I talked about my day, she'd nod absently, scrolling through her phone. The intimacy we'd once shared had faded to something polite, something distant. Yet every evening, after checking this mysterious mail, she'd come back transformed. What was I supposed to think? I tried asking her directly. "You seem really happy lately," I said one night as she returned, practically glowing. "Do I?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes when she looked at me. "I guess the evening air agrees with me. Maybe I should come with you sometime," I suggested, watching her face carefully. The smile froze. Just for a second, but I caught it. "Oh, you'd be bored," she said quickly. "It's just a walk. I listen to podcasts. You hate podcasts." That was true, but it was also deflection. I felt it in my gut, that sinking sensation that something was wrong. What was she really doing during those walks? Who was she seeing? I started paying more attention. I noticed she'd shower before these evening excursions, put on perfume. Not obvious amounts, but enough. She'd change out of her work clothes into something nicer. Not provocative, just better. She was making an effort for someone. Just not for me. One evening, I pretended to be asleep on the couch. Through half-closed eyes, I watched her check her appearance in the hallway mirror, smoothing her hair, adjusting her collar. The care she took, the little smile playing at her lips. I hadn't seen her look at herself that way in years. My chest tightened. Was I losing her? Had I already lost her? I wanted to follow her, but something held me back. Fear, maybe. Fear of what I'd discover. As long as I didn't know for certain, I could pretend everything was fine. I could live in denial. But denial is a slow poison, isn't it? It eats away at you from the inside. The worst part was how she'd come back and act so normal, so casual. She'd ask me about my day as if she hadn't just been somewhere, with someone doing God knows what. The deception was so smooth, so practiced. How long had this been going on? Had I been blind all along? I started noticing other things. The way she'd guard her phone, angling the screen away from me. The new password I didn't know. The texts that would make her smile before she quickly dismissed them. The calls she'd take in another room, speaking in low tones. "Who was that?" I'd ask when she returned. I'd ask when, "Just Jenny from my pottery class." She'd say, "Just my sister." Always just someone innocuous, someone I had no reason to question. But I was questioning everything now. Every smile, every excuse, every "I'm just checking the mail" felt like a lie. My wife of 17 years was slipping away from me, and I didn't even know who she was slipping away to. That's when I made the decision. I needed to know the truth, whatever it was. I couldn't live like this anymore, suspended in uncertainty, slowly going mad with suspicion. I needed proof, one way or another. I was going to find out where Sarah really went every evening at 8 o'clock. And I was going to find out who made her smile like that. Because it sure as hell wasn't me anymore. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to Sarah, listening to her peaceful breathing, and felt like a stranger in my own life. How had it come to this? When exactly had we stopped being partners and become two people sharing a house out of habit? The next morning, I called in sick to work. I couldn't focus on spreadsheets and tax returns when my entire world was potentially crumbling. Sarah seemed surprised to find me still home at 9 o'clock. "Are you feeling okay?" she asked, touching my forehead with concern that felt genuine. Or was I so far gone that I couldn't even trust her worry anymore? "Just tired," I lied. "Didn't sleep well." She made me breakfast. Scrambled eggs and toast, just the way I liked them. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, and I studied her face. This woman who I'd loved for nearly 2 decades. This woman who'd cried in my arms when her mother died. This woman who'd held my hand in the hospital when I had my appendix removed. Was she really capable of betraying me? Or was I creating a problem where none existed? Was I the villain here, letting paranoia destroy something beautiful? After Sarah went to her studio, I sat alone with my coffee and took inventory of what I stood to lose. Our home. We'd bought it together, painted every room ourselves, planted the garden out back. Our shared history, all those memories, good and bad, that had woven our lives together. Our future. The plans we'd made. The retirement we'd been saving for, growing old together, and if I was wrong, if I confronted her without proof and she was innocent, I'd poison our marriage with my own suspicions. Some accusations once made can never be taken back. Trust once broken is nearly impossible to rebuild. But if I was right and did nothing, I'd be a fool, a willing cuckold, a man too weak to face reality. I'd spend the rest of my life wondering, doubting, slowly dying inside while pretending everything was fine. What would my father have done? He'd been a man of action, always direct, sometimes brutally so. But he'd also driven my mother away with his temper and suspicions. I didn't want to be him. What would a rational person do? Someone smarter than me? Someone who knew how to handle this impossible situation? I needed evidence. Cold, hard, undeniable evidence. Not speculation, not gut feelings, not paranoid interpretations of innocent behavior. Facts. The idea came to me around noon. A security camera. We'd talked about installing them before, after a spate of break-ins in the neighborhood last year, but never gotten around to it. Now I had the perfect excuse. If Sarah questioned it, I'd say I was worried about theft. Simple. Logical. Innocent. I drove to the electronics store in the next town over, where no one would recognize me. Paranoid? Maybe. But I didn't want anyone asking questions, didn't want gossip starting before I even knew what I was dealing with. I bought a wireless camera system with night vision, motion activation, and cloud storage. The sales clerk, a kid who couldn't have been more than 20, explained how easy it was to set up. "You can monitor everything from your phone," he said enthusiastically. "Crystal clear video, audio if you want it. Nobody's getting near your house without you knowing about it." If only he knew what I was really trying to catch on camera. Back home, I studied our property with new eyes. Where would Sarah go on these walks? Our house sat on a corner lot. To the left was the Miller family. Parents and 3 young kids, definitely not her destination. To the right was old Mrs. Patterson, an 80-year-old widow who barely left her house. Behind us was a stretch of woods that bordered the neighborhood park. The park, of course. Private enough for a clandestine meeting, public enough to seem innocent if anyone saw you there. I could picture it now, Sarah walking through the trees, meeting someone on a bench, in the playground area by the pond. The thought made my stomach turn. I needed to position the camera to cover the backyard and the path leading to those woods. I spent the afternoon setting it up, mounting it under the eave of our roof, angling it just right. The view was perfect. It captured our entire back patio, the gate in the fence, and the beginning of the wooded path. Sarah came out of her studio around 3, covered in clay dust. "What are you doing up there?" she called. My heart hammered, but I kept my voice steady. "Installing a security camera. After what happened to the Johnsons last month, I figured it was time." "Oh." She nodded, seemingly satisfied with the explanation. "Good idea. Want help?" "I've got it," I said, forcing a smile. "Almost done." She went inside, and I finished the installation with shaking hands. I downloaded the app, tested the feed. Perfect. Crystal clear. I could see everything, and more importantly, I could record everything. That evening, I waited. 7:30 came and went. 7:45. I sat on the couch pretending to read a book, my phone hidden beside me with the camera app open. My pulse thundered in my ears. 8 o'clock. "I'm going to check the mail," Sarah announced, right on schedule. She grabbed her jacket, that same little smile on her face. "Okay," I managed. "See you soon." The front door closed. I waited 30 seconds, then opened the camera app. The feed was live. I watched our empty backyard, the gate, the path beyond. My finger hovered over the record button. This was it. Tonight I'd finally know the truth. Whatever it was, wherever it led, I was ready to face it. Wasn't I? I recorded for an hour that first night. Sarah came back at 8:45, cheerful as always, and I watched the footage after she went to bed. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the timeline. There, movement at 8:07. I held my breath and pressed play. Sarah appeared on screen, walking through our back gate. But instead of heading toward the woods and the park beyond, she turned right, moving along the fence line toward Mrs. Patterson's property. The angle wasn't perfect, but I could see enough. She disappeared from view behind the hedgerow that separated our yards. Mrs. Patterson? That made no sense. The old woman was practically a recluse. Why would Sarah spend an hour with her every evening? Unless my mind raced with possibilities. Was Mrs. Patterson sick? Was Sarah helping her somehow? But why keep it secret? Why the perfume, the careful grooming, the flushed cheeks when she returned? I needed a better angle. The next day, while Sarah was in her studio, I installed a second camera, this one positioned to cover the side yard and part of Mrs. Patterson's property. I felt like a spy in my own neighborhood, skulking around with equipment, trying not to be seen. The Miller's teenage son waved at me from their driveway, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. "Installing security!" I called out, too loudly, too enthusiastically. He gave me a weird look and went inside. That evening I had both camera feeds open on my phone. 8 o'clock came. Sarah grabbed her jacket. "Checking the mail," she said, and I noticed she wouldn't quite meet my eyes. Did she suspect something? Could she sense my surveillance? "Drive safe," I said automatically, then cursed myself. She wasn't driving anywhere, but she didn't seem to notice my slip. This time, I watched in real time as she exited the back gate and moved to Mrs. Patterson's yard. The second camera picked her up clearly. She walked straight to Mrs. Patterson's back door and knocked. The door opened immediately, as if someone had been waiting for her. But it wasn't Mrs. Patterson who answered. It was a man, tall, maybe early 50s, with grey at his temples and a build that suggested he worked out regularly. He smiled when he saw Sarah, that kind of warm, intimate smile you reserve for someone special. And Sarah? God, the look on her face. I'd forgotten she could look at anyone that way. She used to look at me like that, years ago. They embraced. Not a friendly hug, not a polite greeting. He pulled her close, his hand on the small of her back, and she melted into him. The embrace lasted too long, much too long. When they pulled apart, he kept one hand on her waist as he guided her inside. I sat frozen on the couch, my phone clenched so tight my knuckles were white. The video continued recording, but there was nothing more to see. Just an empty yard, a closed door, and my entire life falling apart behind it. Who was this man? What was he doing in Mrs. Patterson's house? And how long had this been going on? I called Mrs. Patterson's house. It rang 6 times before her quavery voice answered. "Hello? Mrs. Patterson, it's Tom from next door. I was wondering if you needed anything from the store tomorrow." "Oh, how sweet of you, dear. But my nephew takes care of all that for me. He's staying with me for a while, you know. Such a good boy, making sure I'm not alone." "Nephew, of course. That's wonderful," I forced out. "What's his name? I should introduce myself." "His name is Daniel. Daniel Patterson. He's my late brother's son, came from Seattle to help me out. I've been having trouble with my hip, you see." We talked for a few more minutes, my mind racing the entire time. After I hung up, I sat in the dark living room, reality sinking in like a stone in water. Sarah was having an affair, with Mrs. Patterson's nephew, in the old woman's house, every single evening at 8 o'clock. For months, the betrayal was stunning in its banality. This wasn't some dramatic romance, some swept-away passion that I could almost understand. This was calculated, scheduled, routine. She'd built a secret life right next door to me. When she came home that night at 8:50, I was still on the couch. She looked flushed, happy, satisfied. "Hey," she said brightly. "You're still up. Couldn't sleep." I said. It wasn't a lie. I might never sleep again. She kissed the top of my head as she passed, a perfunctory gesture, meaningless. I could smell him on her. Cologne, aftershave, the scent of another man clinging to my wife's skin. Over the next week, I recorded every evening. The footage was damning. Same time, same place, same guilty secret. On Wednesday, I captured them in Mrs. Patterson's backyard garden, sitting close on a bench, his arm around her shoulders. She was laughing at something he said, touching his arm the way she used to touch mine. On Friday, I saw them kiss. It was brief, almost chaste, but the tenderness in it destroyed me more than a passionate embrace would have. This wasn't just physical. They cared about each other. How long until she asked for a divorce? How long until she told me she'd fallen in love with someone else? I needed to know more about Daniel Patterson. I created a fake social media profile and found him easily. Seattle-based physical therapist, divorced 3 years ago. 2 college-aged kids. His photos showed a fit, attractive man who liked hiking and craft beer. In other words, everything I wasn't. Where I'd gotten soft around the middle, he was toned. Where I'd grown boring and predictable, he probably had exciting stories about the Pacific Northwest and starting over after divorce. I hated him with an intensity that scared me. But more than that, I hated myself for becoming someone whose wife needed to look elsewhere for happiness. On Sunday morning, Sarah was particularly attentive. She made my favorite breakfast, asked about my week, even suggested we watch a movie together that evening. The guilt was eating at her, I could see it. Or maybe she was just making sure I suspected nothing while she continued her double life. Actually, she said, I might need to check the mail around 8. Jenny's dropping off some supplies for the pottery class. A new lie. They were evolving, getting more elaborate. She was getting sloppy, or maybe more confident. Did Daniel know about me? Did they laugh about the clueless husband next door while they were together? That evening, I watched her leave through the front door, then switched to the camera feeds. But something was different. As Sarah walked through the back gate, she paused and looked up, directly at where I'd installed the second camera. Her expression changed. The smile dropped. She stared at the camera for a long moment, and I swear she was thinking, calculating. Then she continued to Mrs. Patterson's house, but her body language had shifted. Tense, alert. She knew, or at least she suspected. The game was changing. We were both watching each other now, waiting to see who would make the first move. I couldn't pretend anymore. The pretending was killing me, eating me alive from the inside. On Monday morning, I took a personal day from work and drove to a lawyer's office across town. Margaret Chen came highly recommended by a colleague who'd been through a divorce 5 years ago. She was efficient and kind, which somehow made it worse. This was really happening. I was sitting in a divorce attorney's office discussing asset division and evidence of adultery. The video footage will be useful, Margaret said, reviewing the clips I'd transferred to a USB drive. Ohio is a no-fault state, but evidence of an affair can influence spousal support decisions. How long have you been married? 17 years. My voice sounded hollow. Any children? No, we tried, but it never happened. Another loss, another failure. Maybe if we'd had kids, Sarah wouldn't have strayed. Or maybe I was just looking for someone else to blame besides myself. Margaret walked me through my options. We could pursue a formal separation first, or go straight to divorce. We needed to document all shared assets, separate accounts, get the house appraised. It was sterile, mechanical, reducing 17 years of marriage to a spreadsheet and a division of property. Take some time to think about what you want, Margaret said as I left. And Tom, don't confront her without a plan. Emotions run high in these situations. People do things they regret, but I couldn't help myself. That evening, I was waiting when Sarah came home from her mail check. She walked in, glowing, as usual, and stopped when she saw me sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open. We need to talk, I said. Her face went pale. About what? I turned the laptop around, showing her a freeze frame from the camera footage. Her and Daniel, embracing in Mrs. Patterson's backyard. About this, the silence that followed felt like falling. Sarah's mouth opened, closed. She looked at the screen, at me, back at the screen. Tom, How long? My voice was surprisingly steady. How long have you been sleeping with Mrs. Patterson's nephew? I'm not sleeping with him! The protest came quick, automatic, and probably true. That almost made it worse somehow. It's not like that. Then what is it like, Sarah? Enlighten me. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been having an affair right under my nose for months. She sank into a chair, her face in her hands. You installed cameras. You've been spying on me. Don't turn this around. You lied to me. Every single night you lied to my face and went to be with another man. I needed something for myself. She looked up, and there were tears in her eyes, but also anger. Do you know what it's like living with you? You're here, but you're not here. You work, you come home, you sit on that couch like a zombie. When was the last time we had a real conversation? When was the last time you asked me about my day and actually listened to the answer? So this is my fault? The words came out sharp, bitter. I'm boring, so you found someone more interesting? Daniel listens to me. He sees me. When I talk, he looks at me like I matter. You're my wife. Of course you matter. Do I? She laughed, but it was a broken sound. When's my birthday, Tom? Without looking at your phone, tell me when my birthday is. I opened my mouth, closed it. My mind went blank. Sarah, September 23rd. You forgot it this year, completely forgot. I spent the whole day waiting for you to remember, and you never did. You came home and asked what was for dinner. The shame was crushing. She was right. I had forgotten. I've been stressed at work. You're always stressed at work. You're always tired, always distracted, always somewhere else. I've been lonely in this marriage for years, Tom. Years. Before I could respond, there was a knock at the front door. Loud, insistent. We both froze. Sarah's eyes widened. Don't answer it, she whispered, but I was already moving. I yanked open the door to find Daniel Patterson standing on my porch. Up close, he was even more imposing than on camera. 6'2" easily, broad-shouldered, with an intensity in his eyes that made my fight-or-flight instinct kick in. We need to talk, he said, pushing past me into my house. Into my house. The audacity of it left me speechless for a moment. Sarah stood in the kitchen doorway. Daniel, no, please go. He knows, Daniel said, gesturing at me. The cameras, Sarah. I told you he'd installed cameras. I saw them last week. So they'd been discussing me. Planning. Probably laughing at the clueless husband with his amateur surveillance. You need to leave, I said, finding my voice. This is my home, and Sarah is your wife, who you've neglected for years. Daniel's tone was matter-of-fact, almost pitying. I'm not here to fight with you. I'm here to tell you that Sarah deserves better. She deserves someone who appreciates her, who makes time for her, who doesn't take her for granted. You self-righteous son of a— Tom, please. Sarah stepped between us. Daniel, you shouldn't have come here. He's going to try to destroy you in a divorce, Daniel said to her, ignoring me entirely. I've seen his type before. He'll use those recordings, make you out to be the villain, try to take everything out of spite. I haven't decided anything yet, I said coldly. But you being here, threatening me in my own home, that's not helping your case, or hers. Daniel finally looked at me directly. You don't deserve her. I want you to know that. Whatever happens, wherever this goes, you need to understand that you drove her away. This is on you. Get out. My hands were shaking. Get out of my house before I call the police. Come on, Daniel. Sarah took his arm. Please, just go. He let her lead him to the door, but he turned back at the threshold. Think about what you really want, Tom. Do you want to save your marriage? Or do you just want to punish her for being human? The door closed behind them. I stood in my living room, surrounded by the debris of my life, and felt utterly lost. Sarah came back inside a minute later, her face blotchy from crying. I need some time, she said quietly. I'm going to stay with my sister for a few days. We both need to cool down, think clearly. Sarah, please don't. Not right now. I can't think straight with you looking at me like that. She went upstairs to pack a bag. I didn't try to stop her. What would I say? She was right about so many things, and I was right about others, and somewhere in the middle our marriage had died without either of us really noticing. When she left, the house felt enormous and empty. I sat on the couch, that couch she'd accused me of vegetating on, and stared at nothing. My phone buzzed. A text from my brother. Want to grab a beer tomorrow? I needed more than a beer. I needed absolution, understanding, someone to tell me I wasn't crazy for feeling betrayed, even if I'd been a neglectful husband. I needed a friend. But first, I needed sleep. Real sleep. Not the fitful half-consciousness I'd been surviving on. Tomorrow, I'd figure out what came next. Tonight, I'd just try to breathe. Sarah didn't come home for 3 days. I went to work, came back to an empty house, and tried to figure out who I was supposed to be now. Was I the wronged husband? The neglectful spouse who drove his wife away? Both? Neither. On Wednesday evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Tom, it's Daniel." His voice was calmer than when he'd barged into my house, almost friendly. "I think we got off on the wrong foot. Can we talk? Man to man?" Everything in me wanted to hang up, but curiosity won. "I'm listening." "Look, I know this situation is terrible for everyone, but Sarah and we never meant for this to happen. It just did. Sometimes people connect, you know? Sometimes you meet someone, and everything just clicks. You're calling to tell me you're in love with my wife?" The words tasted like poison. "I'm calling to tell you that fighting this will only hurt everyone. Sarah feels guilty enough as it is. She cares about you, Tom. She doesn't want to destroy you. So maybe we can work something out. Something civilized." "Civilized?" I repeated. "You want me to be civilized about you stealing my wife?" "I'm not stealing anyone. She's a person, not property. And she's not happy. Hasn't been for a long time. Surely you've noticed." I had. Of course I had. But I'd ignored it, hoping it would pass, that we'd find our way back to each other eventually. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Let her go. Don't make this ugly with lawyers and accusations. You both walk away with your dignity intact. You can even tell people you're separating because you grew apart. No one needs to know about me." The manipulation was so transparent, it was almost insulting. "And what do I get out of this arrangement, besides losing my wife and my home?" "Your home? Sarah built that pottery business from nothing. She's the one who made that house feel like something more than just 4 walls. But fine, keep it. I'm not after your money, Tom. I just want Sarah to be happy. If you really love her, don't you want that too?" There was a knock at my door. I looked through the window and saw Mrs. Patterson on my porch, leaning on her walker. "I have to go," I told Daniel and hung up. Mrs. Patterson looked frail and apologetic. "Tom, dear, I'm so sorry to bother you. May I come in?" I helped her inside and settled her on the couch. She refused my offer of tea and got straight to the point. "Daniel told me what happened, about you finding out, about the cameras." She wrung her hands. "I feel terrible. I let him stay with me, and I never imagined he'd cause such problems. If I'd known—" "You didn't know he and Sarah were—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "I knew they were friends. Sarah would come over, and they'd talk in my garden. She seemed so happy to have someone to confide in. Daniel just went through a difficult divorce himself, you see. They bonded over that, over feeling lonely. I thought it was innocent." She looked up at me with watery eyes. "I'm 82 years old, Tom. I don't see clearly like I used to, in more ways than one. Was she here on Daniel's behalf? Another attempt to make me feel like the villain in this story? Mrs. Patterson, I appreciate you coming by, but I wanted to tell you that Daniel is leaving. He's going back to Seattle at the end of the month. Whatever happened between him and Sarah, it'll be over soon. Maybe you and Sarah can work things out then. End of the month. 3 weeks away." Was this supposed to comfort me? The idea that my wife's affair had an expiration date? I don't think it works like that. After Mrs. Patterson left, I called my brother. Mike lived 2 hours away with his wife and teenage daughter. We weren't particularly close. Different lives, different priorities. But he'd been through a rough patch in his own marriage 5 years ago. If anyone would understand, it would be him. "Jesus, Tom," he said when I finished explaining everything. "That's brutal. I'm sorry, man." "Mike, I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to fight for her. Part of me wants to burn the whole thing down. And part of me just feels tired. Come stay with us this weekend. Get out of that house. Clear your head. Lisa would love to see you, and Emma asks about her Uncle Tom all the time." I accepted gratefully. That Friday, I made the drive to Mike's place, a rambling farmhouse that always smelled like Lisa's cooking and dog hair from their 3 labs. It felt like another world, one where marriages worked and families stayed together. Over beers on his back porch, Mike told me about his near divorce. I was working 80-hour weeks, trying to make partner at the firm. I thought I was doing it for Lisa and Emma, providing for them. But I was just absent. Lisa was raising Emma alone, dealing with everything alone, and she got lonely. Did she? No, but she thought about it. There was a guy at her yoga class. She told me later that she'd been tempted, that he'd asked her out for coffee, and she'd almost said yes. That's when I woke up. Realized I was about to lose everything that mattered. How'd you fix it? Therapy. A lot of therapy. Cutting back at work. Actually showing up for my life instead of just passing through it. He looked at me seriously. But Tom, here's the thing. It worked because we both wanted it to work. Both of us. Does Sarah want to save your marriage? That was the question, wasn't it? I don't know. Maybe she did, before Daniel. Now, I think she's already gone. Then you need to decide what you want. Do you want to fight for someone who might not want to be fought for? Or do you want to move forward, even if forward means alone? Emma came out then, 16 and full of the unself-conscious energy of teenagers. Uncle Tom, Mum says you're staying the whole weekend. Want to watch a movie with us? Dad always falls asleep, but you might actually stay awake. I let myself be pulled back inside, into their warm, chaotic family life. For 2 days, I helped Lisa cook, played board games with Emma, talked sports with Mike. I felt human again. Not healed, not whole, but less broken than when I'd arrived. Sunday evening, Mike walked me to my car. Whatever you decide, we've got your back. You're not alone in this, okay? Thanks, Mike. Really. As I drove home, my phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. We need to talk. Can I come by tomorrow evening? My stomach knotted. This was it. Decision time. I texted back. 7 p.m. I'd spent the weekend finding my footing again. Now I had to figure out what I wanted my life to look like, with or without Sarah in it. Sarah arrived at 7 sharp, but she didn't come alone. Daniel was with her, and the sight of them together on my doorstep sent a surge of anger through me that I had to physically push down. What is he doing here? I asked, blocking the doorway. We thought it would be better if we all talked together. Sarah said, like adults, to figure out how to move forward without destroying each other. Every instinct screamed at me to slam the door in their faces, but Margaret Chen's words echoed in my head. Document everything. Stay calm. Don't give them ammunition. Fine, come in. They sat together on the couch. My couch, in my house, while I took the armchair opposite. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. Them as a unit, me alone. Tom, Sarah began, her voice soft, placating. I want you to know that I never meant to hurt you. What happened between Daniel and me, it wasn't planned. It just happened. Things don't just happen, Sarah. You made choices. Every evening you made a choice. Daniel leaned forward, his expression earnest. You're right. We made choices. But we're here to make better ones now. We want to handle this the right way. The right way? I laughed bitterly. Is there a right way to wreck a marriage? There's a way that doesn't end in lawyers and courtrooms and everyone losing everything. Daniel said, We're proposing a solution that works for everyone. Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. Daniel helped me draw up a separation agreement. It's fair, Tom. More than fair. You keep the house, all the furniture, your retirement account. I take my pottery business and equipment. We split the savings 50-50, and we go our separate ways. No fault, no drama, no ugly divorce trial. I took the folder but didn't open it. You had him help you? Your boyfriend helped you plan how to leave me? He's a friend who's been through this before, Sarah said defensively. He knows how these things work. And honestly, Tom, what did you expect? That we'd just pretend nothing happened? That I'd come crawling back and we'd play house again? There it was, the mask slipping. I saw it in her eyes, heard it in her tone. This wasn't about reconciliation or figuring things out. This was about making her exit as painless as possible for her. What Sarah is trying to say, Daniel interjected, his hand finding hers, is that we all need to accept reality. Your marriage was over long before I came into the picture. We're just helping it end with dignity. My marriage is my business, not yours. I looked at Sarah. Do you love him? She hesitated, which was answer enough. But she said it anyway. I think I do. I'm sorry, Tom. I know that's not what you want to hear. How long until you move to Seattle with him? They exchanged a glance. Sarah's cheeks flushed. We haven't decided anything definite. But you've discussed it. I felt oddly calm, like I was watching this happen to someone else. So this whole thing, coming here, the agreement, the let's be adults act, this is just you trying to expedite your exit so you can start your new life without any messy complications. That's not fair, Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. Fair? I stood up. You want to talk about fair? You carried on an affair for months while I worked to support both of us. You lied to my face every single day. You brought your boyfriend here to my home to convince me to let you walk away with minimal consequences. And now you're upset that I'm not playing along? Daniel stood too, and I was reminded again how much bigger he was than me. Watch your tone. Sarah is trying to be reasonable here. Reasonable. I looked at Sarah. Is he always this involved in your decisions? Or is he just here to intimidate me? No one's trying to intimidate anyone, Sarah said quickly. Daniel, maybe you should wait in the car. I'm not leaving you alone with him when he's acting like this. Like what? Like a man who just found out his wife is leaving him? Sorry if I'm not making this easy for you, Daniel, but you don't get to come into my house and tell me how to react to my life falling apart. Your life is falling apart because you let it. Daniel shot back. Sarah tried to talk to you, tried to connect with you, and you shut her out. You were so buried in your own routine that you didn't even notice her slipping away. So yes, your marriage failed. But don't pretend you're some innocent victim here. The words stung because they held truth. But they were also manipulative, carefully crafted to make me doubt myself, to make this my fault. I'd had time to think over the weekend, time to get perspective. Yes, I'd been an imperfect husband, but I hadn't been the one who'd lied and cheated. I want you both to leave, I said quietly. Now, Tom, please just look at the agreement. Sarah tried. Get out of my house. Take your boyfriend and your terms and get out. If you want a divorce, get your own lawyer. We'll do this the right way, with legal counsel and proper proceedings. Not with your affair partner dictating terms in my living room. Daniel's jaw tightened. You're making a mistake. This could be clean and simple. Instead, you're going to make it messy and expensive for both of you out of spite. Maybe, but at least I'll have my self-respect. They left, finally, but not before Daniel turned at the door. You're going to regret this. We're trying to help you, but you're too stubborn to see it. When you're paying thousands in legal fees and still end up with the same result, remember that we offered you an easier way. After they were gone, I opened the folder. The agreement was laughably one-sided. Sarah would get half the house's equity without having to sell it immediately, 3/4 of the savings, and full ownership of her business equipment, most of which I'd paid for. It was dressed up in legal language, but it was basically a robbery. I called Margaret Chen, even though it was after hours. She called back within 10 minutes. They brought him to your house? Her professional demeanor cracked for a moment. Tom, that's incredibly inappropriate. And this agreement, don't sign anything. This is exactly the kind of pressure tactic I was worried about. I'm not signing anything without you reviewing it first. Good. Listen to me carefully. Change your locks tonight. Document everything they said while it's fresh. And from now on, all communication with Sarah goes through me. No more face-to-face meetings, no more phone calls. They're trying to manipulate you into a bad deal, and we're not going to let that happen. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and felt something shift inside me. The guilt I'd been carrying, the sense that maybe I deserved this. It was gone. Sarah and Daniel had overplayed their hand. They'd shown me exactly who they were. Two people so focused on their own happiness that they'd steamroll anyone in their way. I'd wanted to save my marriage. I'd wanted to believe we could work through this. But you can't reconcile with someone who's already checked out, who's already planning their next life with someone else. So fine. If they wanted a fight, they'd get one. But it would be on my terms, with my lawyer playing by the rules. No more manipulation, no more pressure, no more making me feel like the villain for refusing to facilitate my own betrayal. I changed the locks that night, just like Margaret suggested. When Sarah texted asking for her clothes, I told her to have her lawyer contact mine. She could get her belongings during a scheduled time with a sheriff present, just like the law allowed. Her response was immediate and angry. "This is ridiculous. I just want my things." "Should have thought of that before you brought your boyfriend to pressure me." I typed back. Then I blocked her number. It felt good. For the first time in months, I felt like I had some control. This wasn't about revenge. It was about self-preservation, about refusing to be a doormat in my own life. The fight was just beginning. The divorce proceedings moved faster than I expected. Margaret filed the paperwork, citing irreconcilable differences and Sarah's adultery. In Ohio, proof of an affair meant Sarah would have a harder time claiming spousal support. The camera footage I'd collected became our key evidence. Sarah hired a lawyer, a sleek woman named Patricia Vaughan, who had a reputation for being ruthless. Their strategy became clear quickly. Paint me as a controlling, paranoid husband who'd spied on his wife and denied her basic friendship and companionship. They filed a counter-petition claiming I'd created a hostile home environment through surveillance and emotional neglect. It might have worked if I didn't have time-stamped video of Sarah and Daniel embracing, holding hands, stealing kisses in Mrs. Patterson's garden. Patricia tried to argue that nothing physical had happened, that this was merely an emotional affair. But Margaret was ready. "We have sworn statements from neighbors who witnessed Mrs. Evans and Mr. Patterson's meetings," Margaret said during a pre-trial conference. "We have phone records showing hundreds of calls and texts between them. And we have Mrs. Evans' own admission that she has feelings for Mr. Patterson. The court doesn't require proof of sexual intercourse to recognize adultery in the form of an inappropriate romantic relationship." The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s named Barbara Morrison, studied the evidence with the impassive expression. "I'm inclined to agree. The pattern of deception and the romantic nature of the relationship are evident. However, I'm also troubled by the installation of cameras without the other spouse's knowledge. Mr. Evans, did you inform your wife you were recording the property?" "No, Your Honor, but I installed them on my own property, in areas visible to the public. I wasn't recording inside our home or any private spaces." Judge Morrison nodded. "The cameras will be allowed as evidence. We'll proceed to mediation next week. I suggest both parties come prepared to negotiate in good faith, or we'll be looking at a trial. And I assure you, trials are expensive and unpleasant for everyone involved." The mediation session was scheduled for the following Thursday. I arrived with Margaret, ready for whatever Sarah and Daniel might throw at me. But when I walked into the conference room, only Sarah and Patricia were there. "Where's your boyfriend?" I asked. I couldn't help myself. Patricia shot me a warning look. "Mr. Patterson is not party to these proceedings and won't be present. Let's keep this professional, shall we?" But Sarah looked rattled. Her usually polished appearance was frayed, hair pulled back messily, no makeup, dark circles under her eyes. She wouldn't look at me directly. The mediator, a calm older man named Robert Green, laid out the ground rules. "We're here to reach a fair settlement. Both parties have submitted their proposals. Let's start with the marital home. 4 hours later, we were still deadlocked. Patricia kept pushing for Sarah to receive half the house's value, along with a share of my retirement account and substantial spousal support. Margaret countered that Sarah's affair and her plans to relocate to Seattle with Daniel meant she'd forfeited any right to support. My client isn't moving to Seattle, Patricia insisted. She's staying in Ohio to maintain her business. That's interesting, Margaret said, pulling out her phone, because Mr. Patterson listed his aunt's house for sale 3 days ago, and I have screenshots from social media showing him looking at rental properties in Seattle with someone who looks remarkably like Mrs. Evans. Sarah's face went white. Patricia's carefully maintained composure cracked. Where did you get that information? Public records and public social media posts. Your client wasn't as discreet as she thought. Margaret turned to Sarah directly. Mrs. Evans, are you planning to move to Seattle with Mr. Patterson? Because lying in mediation won't help your case. Sarah looked at Patricia, who subtly shook her head. But Sarah was done pretending. Yes, she said quietly. Daniel asked me to come with him. We're planning to move after the divorce is final. The admission hung in the air. Patricia looked like she wanted to strangle her own client. The mediator made notes. Margaret sat back with a satisfied expression. Well, Robert Green said, that does change things. Mrs. Evans, you understand that relocating out of state indicates you're voluntarily leaving the marital home and establishing a new life. That significantly affects what support, if any, the court might award. We took a break. In the hallway, I called Mike. They're falling apart, I told him. Sarah just admitted she's moving to Seattle. Her lawyer looks ready to quit. That's good, right? It's better than good. It means I'm not crazy. It means everything I suspected was true, and now it's on record. When we reconvened, Patricia had regrouped. She made a new proposal. Sarah would take her business equipment, her personal possessions, and $25,000 from the savings account. In exchange, she'd waive all claims to the house, my retirement account, and any spousal support. It's a clean break, Patricia said. Both parties walk away and move on with their lives. Margaret looked at me. I nodded. It wasn't perfect, but it was fair. More importantly, it was done. We'll need everything in writing and signed by Monday, Margaret said. And Mr. Evans would like Mrs. Evans to remove her belongings from the house within 2 weeks, with proper scheduling through our offices. Sarah finally looked at me. Tom, I'm sorry, for all of it. I know you don't believe me, but I am. Are you sorry for what you did? Or sorry you got caught? She didn't answer. Maybe she didn't know herself. That evening, Daniel showed up at my house. I'd been expecting this. The cameras were still running. I'd kept them active on Margaret's advice, and I made sure to answer the door with my phone recording audio. You couldn't just let her go with dignity, could you? He was angry, aggressive. You had to humiliate her, drag everything into court, make her out to be a villain. She humiliated herself. I just refused to lie about it. You're a bitter, small man. You know that? Sarah wasted 17 years on you, and this is how you repay her? By destroying her in a divorce? I'm destroying her. She's the one who cheated. She's the one who planned to leave me for you. I'm just making sure I don't get robbed in the process. She deserves better than what you're giving her. Then it's good she's leaving, isn't it? You two can ride off into the Seattle sunset and leave me in peace. Daniel stepped closer, trying to intimidate me with his size. You're making a mistake. Sarah has friends, Tom, people who care about her. And when they hear how you've treated her, are you threatening me? I held up my phone. Because I'm recording this conversation, and I'm happy to share it with my lawyer. And the police, if necessary. He backed off, realizing he'd overstepped. This isn't over. Yes, it is. The mediation is done, the settlement is agreed upon, and Sarah is leaving. It's over, Daniel. You won. You got what you wanted. So take your victory and get off my property before I have you arrested for trespassing. He left, and I immediately sent the recording to Margaret. She called back within minutes. Tom, this is perfect. He just threatened you. If he comes back or contacts you again, we can get a restraining order. I don't think he will. He knows he screwed up. Still, document everything. We're almost through this. The following Monday, both parties signed the divorce agreement. Judge Morrison reviewed it, asked if we both understood and agreed to the terms, and finalized the dissolution of our marriage. 17 years, ended with signatures on paper and a judge's stamp. Sarah left the courtroom with Patricia. She didn't look back. Daniel was waiting for her in the parking lot. I watched them drive away together from Margaret's office window. "How do you feel?" Margaret asked. "Free," I said, and I meant it. The divorce was finalized in November, 6 weeks after the mediation. Sarah moved out of the house in early December, taking only what the settlement allowed. I made sure everything was documented with a neutral third party present, a representative from a moving company who inventoried every item she removed. She tried to take some of the pottery equipment I'd bought her for anniversaries and birthdays over the years. I had receipts proving I'd purchased them, which meant they were gifts that had become my property as part of the marital assets. Patricia argued it was petty to deny her the tools of her trade. Margaret argued that Sarah should have thought of that before committing adultery. Judge Morrison sided with me. The equipment stayed. Sarah could buy her own tools in Seattle. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 weeks after Sarah left for Seattle with Daniel, Patricia Vaughn filed a motion to modify the settlement. She claimed Sarah had been under extreme emotional duress during mediation and hadn't been thinking clearly. She wanted the judge to award Sarah additional compensation for her lost business opportunities and emotional suffering. Margaret was livid. "This is a desperate move. They have no grounds." The hearing was scheduled for early January. I showed up prepared with every piece of evidence we'd collected. The videos, the text messages between Sarah and Daniel, phone records showing they'd been in contact for 8 months before I'd discovered the affair. Margaret even had sworn statements from Mrs. Patterson and several neighbors who'd witnessed Sarah and Daniel's relationship. Patricia tried to argue that I'd been emotionally abusive, that my installation of cameras had created an atmosphere of distrust that had driven Sarah into Daniel's arms. But when Margaret presented the timeline, showing that Sarah's affair had begun weeks before I'd installed any surveillance, that argument fell apart. Then Patricia made a critical error. She called Sarah to testify via video conference from Seattle. Sarah appeared on the courtroom screen, sitting in what looked like a modern apartment with Daniel visible in the background. Margaret pounced on that immediately. "Mrs. Evans, or should I say Ms. Evans now, you're calling from your residence in Seattle?" "Yes." "And is that Mr. Patterson in the background?" Sarah glanced behind her. Daniel quickly moved out of frame. "Yes. So you're living with Mr. Patterson? The man you claimed was just a friend? Just someone you'd talk to in Mrs. Patterson's garden?" "Well, it's complicated. It seems quite simple to me. You carried on an affair, you lied about its nature and extent, and now you're attempting to extract more money from your ex-husband, despite having already agreed to a settlement. Does that about sum it up?" Patricia objected, but the damage was done. Judge Morrison had seen enough. "Ms. Vaughn, your motion is denied. The settlement stands as agreed. Ms. Evans, you entered into that agreement with full legal counsel and under no duress beyond the normal stress of divorce proceedings. You don't get to change your mind now because you regret the consequences of your actions. This case is closed." The gavel came down, final, absolute. In the hallway afterward, Margaret shook my hand. "That's it, Tom. You're officially done with both of them." But the universe wasn't quite finished with Sarah and Daniel. In March, I got a call from Mrs. Patterson. "Tom, dear, I thought you should know. Daniel is back in town." My stomach clenched. "Why?" "He and Sarah broke up. Apparently, living together wasn't what they'd imagined. He came back to help me sell the house and move into assisted living. He looks terrible, Tom. Absolutely miserable. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt nothing. These people had consumed my thoughts for months, but now they were just strangers whose drama no longer involved me. How's Sarah? Still in Seattle, as far as I know. Daniel says she's struggling. Her pottery business never took off there. Too much competition, too expensive to rent studio space. She's working retail to make ends meet. The woman who'd thrown away our marriage for a fresh start was now folding clothes in a department store 3,000 miles away. There was a poetic justice to it, though I took no pleasure in her suffering. In April, I ran into Daniel at the grocery store. He looked like a different person, thinner, greyer, with a haunted look in his eyes. He tried to avoid me, but I caught up to him in the parking lot. "Tom?" He couldn't meet my eyes. "I didn't expect to see you. Why'd you come back?" He laughed bitterly. "Why do you think? It didn't work out. The grand romance, the fresh start, all of it. Turns out sneaking around is exciting, but real life is just life. Sarah and I had nothing in common except our unhappiness. When we didn't have your marriage to hide in, we realized we didn't actually like each other very much. That's unfortunate." "Is it? You must be loving this, watching us implode." "I don't love it. I don't feel anything about it. You're not part of my life anymore, Daniel. Neither is Sarah. You're just two people who made bad choices and have to live with them." He nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, you were right. About everything. We were selfish, manipulative, and cruel. Sarah regrets it. I regret it. Not that it matters now." "No," I agreed. "It doesn't." I drove home to my house, fully mine now, and felt the last weight lift from my shoulders. They'd tried to make me the villain. They'd tried to gaslight me, pressure me, manipulate me into accepting blame for their betrayal. But I'd stood firm. I'd refused to be bullied or guilt-tripped into surrendering my dignity. In May, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Sarah had moved back to Ohio. Not to our town, but to Cincinnati, 3 hours away. She was trying to rebuild her pottery business, living in a small apartment, barely making ends meet. Daniel had moved to Florida to be near his kids. Mrs. Patterson was settled in a nice assisted living facility. Everyone had moved on. Everyone was living with the consequences of their choices. And me? I was finally free. I refinanced the house to remove Sarah's name from the mortgage. I redecorated, getting rid of furniture that reminded me of her, replacing it with things I actually liked. I started going to the gym, lost 15 pounds, took up hiking. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during my marriage. I wasn't looking for another relationship. After Sarah, I needed time to figure out who I was as a single man, what I wanted from life, what made me happy. But I was open to possibilities, open to whatever came next. The house that had once felt like a tomb of a failed marriage now felt like home. My home. My fresh start. One evening in June, I sat on my back patio with a beer, watching the sunset. The cameras were gone. I'd taken them down months ago. I didn't need them anymore. There was nothing left to protect myself from, no more threats hiding in the shadows. My phone buzzed, a text from Mike. "How you doing, brother?" "Good," I typed back. "Really good." And I meant it. Sarah and Daniel had taken a lot from me. My trust, my naivety, my sense of security. But they hadn't taken everything. They hadn't broken me. If anything, they'd forced me to become stronger, more self-aware, more certain of my own worth. The affair had destroyed my marriage. But it hadn't destroyed me. And that, I realized, was my real victory. A year after the divorce, my life looked nothing like it had during my marriage. I'd started therapy, not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand how I'd become so complacent, so willing to accept less than I deserved. Dr. Reynolds helped me see patterns I'd never recognized, the ways I'd made myself small, avoided conflict, settled for peace over happiness. "You taught people how to treat you," she said during one session. "You taught Sarah that you'd accept neglect, that you wouldn't fight back, that you'd always be there no matter how she treated you. That's not love, Tom. That's enabling." The insight stung, but it freed me. I started setting boundaries in all areas of my life. At work, I stopped taking on extra projects to be the team player. With friends, I stopped being the one who always compromised on plans. With family, I stopped absorbing everyone's problems as my own. I got a promotion in July, senior accountant with a substantial raise. With the extra money, I renovated the kitchen. something Sarah had wanted but we'd never been able to afford. The irony wasn't lost on me. I hired a designer, picked out finishes I loved, and didn't compromise on anything. The result was beautiful, modern, and completely mine. In August, Mike and his family visited. Emma, now 17, was amazed by the transformation. "Uncle Tom, your house is so cool. You're like a completely different person." "I'm the person I should have been all along," I told her. Lisa pulled me aside later. "You look happy. Genuinely happy." "I am. It took me losing everything to figure out what I actually wanted. Through my therapist, I joined a hiking group. Every Saturday morning, a group of us would hit trails within driving distance, ranging from easy walks to challenging climbs. I met interesting people, teachers, doctors, artists, retirees. We weren't looking for romance or deep connection, just people to share a trail with, to challenge ourselves alongside. One of the hikers was a woman named Rachel, a high school biology teacher 3 years my junior. We started grabbing coffee after hikes, then dinner. It wasn't rushed or intense. We were both cautious, both carrying baggage from previous relationships. But it was easy, comfortable, real. "I like that you don't try to be someone you're not," she said one evening. "You're just you, flaws and all." "Is that a compliment?" I asked, laughing. "The best kind." Meanwhile, Sarah's life spiraled. I heard updates through the neighborhood grapevine, though I never sought them out. She'd moved back to Ohio after things imploded with Daniel, but Cincinnati's art scene was saturated. Her pottery business barely covered rent on her studio space. She'd taken a part-time job at a garden center to make ends meet. In October, I got a voicemail from her. I almost deleted it without listening, but curiosity won. "Tom, it's me. Sarah. I know I have no right to call you, but I wanted to say I'm sorry. Really sorry. Not for leaving, but for how I did it. For lying, for bringing Daniel into it. For everything. You deserved better than what I gave you." A long pause. "I heard you're doing well. I'm glad. I really am. Anyway, that's all. Take care of yourself." I saved the voicemail, but never called back. What would I say? Her apology didn't change anything. It didn't undo the lies, didn't erase the betrayal. It was just words, probably motivated more by her own guilt and current struggles than genuine remorse. Rachel asked about her once. "Do you ever regret the divorce?" "Never, not for a second. Even though you spent 17 years together?" "Especially because of that. I spent 17 years becoming someone I didn't recognize. The divorce gave me permission to find myself again. Daniel's story was equally bleak. After Florida didn't work out, his kids resented his affair and wanted nothing to do with him. He bounced between cities, unable to settle anywhere. His physical therapy practice suffered as references from his Seattle clinic dried up. Word had spread about his role in breaking up a marriage, and in the small world of healthcare, reputation mattered. Mrs. Patterson, in one of our occasional phone calls, told me he'd hit rock bottom. He calls sometimes drunk, crying about how he ruined his life. I feel bad for him, but I also think he made his choices. We all have to live with our choices. Christmas came. I spent it with Mike's family, then flew to Colorado for a few days with Rachel. We stayed in a cabin near Vail, hiked in the snow, made dinners together, talked for hours by the fireplace. It was simple, peaceful, everything my marriage had never been. "Is this too fast?" Rachel asked on New Year's Eve as we watched fireworks from the cabin's deck. Sometimes I worry we're rushing into something. We're not rushing. We're just living. Whatever this becomes, it becomes. No pressure, no expectations. She kissed me at midnight, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not desperate hope, not needy hope, but the quiet confidence that life could be good again, that I could be happy again, that I deserved to be happy. Sarah had tried to break me. Daniel had tried to intimidate me. Together, they'd tried to make me feel like I was the problem, like I'd driven Sarah away through my inadequacies, but they'd failed. I'd survived, rebuilt, and come out stronger. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Authentically, unapologetically mine. And that was worth more than any failed marriage had ever been. So that's my story. My wife's evening walks to check the mail led to the end of my marriage, but also to the beginning of my real life. If you were in my position, what would you have done? Fought for the marriage despite the betrayal? Walked away immediately? Burned it all down? There's no right answer, I think. Just the answer that lets you look at yourself in the mirror. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've been through something similar, or if this resonated with you in any way, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories like this, about real people navigating impossible situations, subscribe to the channel. Life is messy, relationships are complicated, but we survive, we adapt, and sometimes we even thrive. Take care of yourselves out there.